Tell us a little bit about your early history, like where you were born, where you grew up.
I was born in August 2nd, 1912, in a little community on the Missouri River called Sunshine Bottom, 10 miles from Lynch and a lot farther than that from anywhere else. I went to school in the local school district, number 26. It was right there on the river. Finished the 8th grade, and then I had to go to stay in town in Lynch to go to high school. It was too far to drive back and forth. So I stayed in Lynch during the week and went home to Sunshine Bottom on Friday and came back on either Sunday afternoon or Monday morning. That went on for 4 years, and I got a 4-year degree from Lynch High School, Boyd County, Nebraska. That was my beginning education.
Now, what was your family? Were you in ranching or?
We were on a small livestock corn farm located on river bottom land across next to the Missouri River, which is one of the big rivers of the world.
Yes, sir. Now, did when you left there, I understood. I'm trying to get my bearings straight. Did you go to Rutgers first, or did you go to Nebraska first?
No, I went to University of Nebraska in Lincoln. After I graduated from high school, my folks said I was too young to be sent off because I was only just barely 17, so I had to stay home and work for a year. But I figured it up on the hours once, and Daddy gave me a check for $600 and took me to Lincoln and put me off in front of a boarding house. And that $600 took care of my first 2 semesters of college with $30 when I went home to Sunshine Bottom in the spring of 1931.
Wow, now that's some good tuition money spent well.
Amen.
Amen. So when you graduated, what did you graduate from Nebraska? What was your degree in
Agronomy.
In agronomy. And so I guess, did you continue in Nebraska for your graduate, or did you move on to Rutgers that time?
Well, yes and no. A little complicated. I went home intending to help my father farm in the spring of 1934, but if you want to check the weather records, you'll find out we didn't have any weather in 1934. There wasn't anything to feed or harvest, so the college took me back as a student instructor, and I went on for my master's degree in soils and crops.
Now, I say 34, is that sometime around what they call the Dust Bowl era?
That was right in the middle of it. We didn't have any Dust Bowl on Sunshine Bottom, but it was close by, and the dust clouds did blow over us.
And then I say affected not only your area, but of course all parts of the Midwest.
Oh, it got worse the farther south you went.
For the south of Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what took you from Nebraska into Rutgers?
Well, it was pretty simple. I had training in soil survey, and I was going to go down to Springfield, Missouri to survey hills. But at the last minute, somebody moved away from a graduate school in Rutgers University, and my professor, a mentor, Dr. Frank Keim, had connections with Rutgers, so I, instead of going to the hills of Missouri, I went to graduate school as an instructor in Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey.
And what year was that?
That was in the summer of 1936.
1936.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, I guess, quite a climate change for you, or not only in change, but also the soil, everything was different in the New York area.
Yes, it was a different world from a farm boy that had spent his life on Sunshine Bottom.
And what was some of your, did you feel like in terms of what you were learning at Rutgers, was that kind of focusing you, I'm assuming you were moving into agronomy then, right?
Oh yes, they pushed me into plant physiology and all kinds of good stuff that was supposed to prepare me for life up ahead.
Life up ahead. So you graduated from Rutgers, and what kind of transferred then?
Well, it gets a little complicated again, but then life is complicated. I finished all of my research work in the summer of 1939, but I was not prepared to write the thesis, so they farmed me out, and I went and got a job with the University of Hawaii in Honolulu while I worked on the statistics of my graduate work. And after 2 years, I went back to New Brunswick and finished up all the paperwork, all the good things, and got myself a brand new PhD certificate.
Yes, sir. Now, this is where you said about that time you were looking around and there weren't too many jobs to be found. Maybe tell us about how you ended up in Florida.
Well, after I got my degree there in May, June of 1941, there I was with a wife and a child and no job. But I did have good friends and good connections. I went back to Nebraska and boarded with my folks and found opening in Florida, down in Florida. Florida was a foreign country as far as a Nebraska boy was concerned. But we got in the car and came to Florida, and there were two jobs, the only two jobs I guess that fit me in the whole United States. One in Quincy and one in Ona. Well, believe it or not, you'd have to be in Ona to believe it. I chose Ona over Quincy and got a job as an agronomist at the Range Cattle Experiment Station, Ona, Florida, University of Florida.
And you were, I take it, one of the first, if not the first faculty member hired at Ona, am I correct?
Actually, the second, Gordon Kirk was already here. He was the animal scientist officer in charge.
Okay. So in some ways, would that be the center director in so many ways for the area? I'm not.
No, Dr. Kirk was the center director, yes, and I was the agronomist, forage agronomist.
Forage agronomist. So you got here in the beginning of the 40s?
I got to Gainesville 3 days before Pearl Harbor. The 4th day of December, I went to work for the University of Florida as a forage agronomist, and I was getting acquainted in Gainesville. I moved to Ona and came to the Range Cattle Station in mid-December, mid-January 1942.
Goodness. So I assume when you got to Ona, it was quite different from what we got now. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. What was it like back then, so to speak?
Well, I turned off the hard road that ran from Ona to Limestone, and the first thing I saw on my left was a pond about 12 inches deep, and it was raining and cloudy and nasty, and the road was sloppy. And so I came on here to the headquarters and checked in. So I was at work at the Range Cattle Station.
Back then there was, as I've heard, there were dirt roads and few fences.
Plenty of them. Yeah, plenty of them.
And what was it like? I mean, I think you said earlier you referred to open range. Maybe tell us a bit what it was like in Florida maybe at that time.
In this area of Florida, it was open range, wide open. This land that the experiment station was located on, still located on, was a part of the original limestone drainage district, which went bottoms up with all the hard times of those days. And so the county had the land, and this is the way the state came into possession of this about 4 square sections of land that comprised the Range Cattle Station in 1941 and still in 2013.
Yes, sir. Now, when you came here, I mean, I'm assuming I'm sure that the work day was quite different. Can you kind of tell us what a typical work day might have been back in the 40s?
Well, we started off a little short of money, which is a pretty human condition. But our work day was very simple: 8 to 12, and 1 to 6, 6 days a week. We had Sunday off. You say, that's kind of strange, but we needed the work. We needed the labor. We just couldn't pay for it. We needed every hour, every day that Dr. Kirk could put in, every hour and every day that I could put in, anybody that we were able to hire, because there was all of this, everything to be fenced, everything to be done. Nothing had been done. Boy, I'll tell you, this was a wide open opportunity.
Wide open. And you mentioned before that it was quite a bit of local labor help. You brought in a lot of people from the outside.
Just about everyone that lived in the miles around worked a few days, a few hours at the Range Cattle Station, and you say, well, how come? Hey, a buck was a buck in 1942, 43. If you don't believe it, you should go back and check.
And it was good money back then.
Oh, it was good money.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, it was good money. I was drawing PhD, all this good stuff for some experience. I was drawing $2,900 a year with with some medical coverage, but in 41, 42, there wasn't much medical coverage.
Right.
Okay.
That was a on the horizon, if you want to say. Now, back then too, and your daughter Margaret was mentioning. Now, is this back when you maybe had a tractor? How did you do your work? You mentioned the problem with stumps. Maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Oh, well, I have to control myself to talk about those stumps because they were everywhere. This land had been cut over for pine lumber, and all of the stumps were sitting here through these fields about, let's see, how tall were they? 24, 30 inches tall, and as solid as a rock because they were rotted away. All the softwood was gone and nothing left but the heartwood. And it was, hey, our tractor had steel wheels. We couldn't put a rubber-tired tractor in here because there were all these little sharp snags. And so we had this steel wheel tractor with lugs about 4 inches deep, and we called him Pop. And he pulled everything. He pulled mowers, he pulled fertilizer spreaders, anything that we had that had to be pulled, Pop pulled it.
Now, how long did you have Pop?
You know, I lost track. He
was good,
he must have lasted here 4, 5, 6 years. I remember when we had a serious discussion over whether we could buy a rubber-tired tractor.
Right.
We decided we could. I suspect we minted a tire or two.
Right. Now, back then, the faculty lived at the center. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, there was a document called The Responsibilities of a Faculty Member, and where you had to be on site. Maybe you can tell us a little bit of the details, remember some of those.
Not too many of the details, but let me put it this way. Dr. Kirk, our center director, friend, was one of the most methodical, orderly men that God ever put on earth, let alone working for the government. And everything was arranged. And if it wasn't arranged, it showed up and was corrected. Thank you very much. And we traded off milk, and we had a cow. We called her Miss Cow. She was a great Burma, and there were 5 families at one time, and we took a turns, morning, evening. Each one had a milking, and if anybody lost track, it was too bad.
And when you said they had, once you milk Miss, what was her name again? Miss Cow?
Miss Cow. Miss Cow.
Once you milked her, you shared that milk, correct?
No, each one kept it, and the next fella got his turn.
His turn.
So at every 5th turn, we got milk.
Now, and there was also something about you were responsible, like you said, you worked on Saturdays.
Oh yes.
People would come to the center on Saturdays, so you had to be ready for them.
They'd come anytime they felt like it. It was their place.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, tell me, I understand there wasn't much electricity back then in the area.
We got electricity here in January of 1946. I remember very well. We got electricity for our refrigerators and lights and anything that we needed. We got electricity. We thought we were in pink heaven.
But before that, you had to run
kerosene lamp.
All right. And then, did you have a diesel? I understand.
No, we didn't.
You didn't have a diesel generator?
No, that was. We were before that.
Oh, you were before that. Okay. All right, you were pre that.
Yeah.
All right. So you were here with your wife, and at that time, 2 daughters.
I had 2 daughters. Yes.
Yep. And then Lucy came along.
14 years later.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to Lucy in a little bit.
All right.
Okay. Maybe let's talk a bit about what was the state of the cattle industry back then. You were telling me earlier about.
Oh, it was very simple. The cow industry was woods cows on woods pasture, and you read if you were honest, you read the brands to see whether it was your cow or not. It was only a little bit changed from when the first cows escaped from the Spanish settlements back in the 1500s. I'm not throwing off, but there was a little change.
Sure. So the cows themselves were actually from the Spanish era.
They were from every dairy that had a cow that went loose, all kinds, but we called them all woods cows.
Woods cows, because they came out of the woods.
Yeah, they came out of the woods.
With little to no fencing.
No fence.
No fence.
In fact, in the late 1940s, I'm not sure we passed the no fence law in Florida, which was very strange because it meant that you had to fence if you wanted to control your cows.
Right.
If you couldn't control them, you couldn't have them.
That makes sense, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it was not the most popular with a lot of folks.
Sure.
But it was necessary.
It's necessary. If you wanted to travel, it seemed like that would be.
Ooh. Well, anyway.
Yeah. So what was some of the? How did you get around back in those days?
Well, around the station, we had horses. We rode horses. The cattle were all handled with horses. I think still are, but we had a truck. We had one truck that was a ton size that we all shared.
Right. And then and so if you had to go into town or to get supplies, you used that truck?
Yes, either that or our cars, depending
What you needed.
Yeah, what we had to do, yeah.
All right. And we'll skip this question here. We're kind of getting out of the 40s and moving more toward the 50s. I'm thinking more of talking about your experience with Angola grass.
Well, yeah, that started pretty early. My friend of a long time, Roy Blazer, had been working in Gainesville for a year or two, and he brought in the fall of 1941, before I got here, he brought some grasses down here to the range cattle station and planted them over on the canal bank somewhere between the houses and the barn. But we didn't take care of it, and I wasn't here yet, so that it disappeared. But again, in 1942, we began to get grasses, different grasses. Let me diverse right here and say, we got our grass materials through the United States Department of Agriculture plant collection system, which traveled the world looking for all kinds of crops that might be useful in the United States. And in that process, we got a lot of grasses, and one of the grasses that we're now speaking of was what became Angola grass, which we again got in 1942. And I remember in 1943 fall, I planted a set of plots with different levels of copper, 0, 5, 15, and 30 pounds of bluestone copper sulfate per acre. And when we went looking at those, it was a warm winter. When we went looking at that, it was a very ragged little field. In the spring, when I went to checking my plot plan, I discovered that anywhere I had 5 or more pounds of bluestone per acre in with the complete fertilizer and lime, we had a nice growth of Angola grass. Where there was no copper, there was a little scraggly Angola with a brown tipped runner that didn't make anything, and that was one of the things that opened the door for our development. By 1950, Angola grass was the wonder grass of the world, of Florida.
Florida. And you told the story earlier, maybe you can tell us that story about how you gave some of this away, maybe the story about the...
Oh, people were very interested in improvement, and as soon as we began to talk about Angola, they said, "Gimme." Well, we just had a little, but in about 1947, we had a 10-acre field all grown up to Angola grass, about 24, 30 inches high, and we mowed it and put it in windrows and told people, bring your pickup trucks. You can have for $50 just as much of this wonder grass as you can carry away on that pickup truck. One of the people somewhere yonder way, he had all figured out. The folks here, the men that were helping with it, joked about it. They called him Jumpin' Joe because he was way up on top of this, piles up stuff on Angola grass, still jumping on it to get one more pitchfork load. But you know, in 47, say $50 was not to be thrown away. You say, hey, it wasn't much, it was small change. No. But hey, that took care. We never